Доброго дня всім.
Good afternoon, everybody. Team of Media Center Ukraine welcomes you, and we start our work for today. So briefly about our schedule. At 1:30 p.m. we'll have Olena Kondratyuk, Deputy Head of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, and we'll discuss the support by Baltic countries of Ukraine's membership in the European Union. At 2:30 p.m. we will have Hanna Mahler, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, as well as Serhiy Sobko, Head of the Territorial Defense Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we will discuss with them situation at the front and the role of territorial defense in defense of Ukraine during the second phase of this war. And at 6 p.m. In our studio we'll have European Regional Director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Hans Kluge, and we'll discuss the situation as healthcare in Ukraine and people's needs in the wartime, as well as results as Dr. Kluge's visit to territories liberated from occupation. And right now, here we have Yevhen Moiseenko, head of the main service center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. Mr. Moiseenko, please tell us about drivers' preparations for exams in service centers under the Ministry of Internal Affairs according to the new procedure. You're welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, I'll start with some general information. This is the 83rd day of heroic defense of Ukraine by armed forces. They push the occupiers, the invaders, way closer to the borders, liberating our territories. At the same time, we have resumed our services in 125 service centers under the Ministry of Internal Affairs in 21 regions of Ukraine. Out of those, 6 centers in the occupied Sumy Oblast has already been resumed. 4 centers in Chernihiv Oblast and 2 centers in Kharkiv Oblast have resumed their operations. Even though in Kharkiv Oblast there are still battles, combat actions, and very soon we are going to open service center in the city of Kharkiv itself. The occupation has not been completed. Therefore, we have not resumed operations of our facilities in Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson oblasts, as well as the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. That said, we still continue every week expanding the network of service centers which resumed their operations. As previously, the main focus of our activities is providing services to citizens. During the wartime, extraterritoriality principle in theoretical and practical exams has been very important. At the same time, we haven't changed the security component in getting the driver's license. The Cabinet of Ministers has supported our initiative and issued resolutions to that effect. What has changed? So first of all, citizens who temporarily moved to another city can now pass practical exam in any service center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Previously, it was only possible in the same service center where they passed theoretical exams. An example, a female resident of Mariupol graduated from the driver school and passed theoretical exams before the start of hostilities in her city. She was forced to leave her city and move to the city of Kyiv. Now she wants to get a driver license. After those changes enter into effect, she'll be able to come to any service center to pass the practical exam and get her first driver's license. It opened the way for many citizens, especially those who have suffered from that aggression, towards getting driver's license in any service center to become normal driver. Also, we have developed a solution for another problem, which is also unfortunately typical now, which may be faced by our citizens. There are cases when after exams are passed, or after a person has passed exams, for some personal because of some personal circumstances, that person cannot get their driver license from the service center. It remains in the service center while the citizen moved to a different town and is unable to get a document from a service center. Now we legally made it possible to get the driver license in any service center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The same applies to people whose term of penalty when they were deprived of their driver license pass. They can get the driver license and pass the exam in any service center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Previously, it was impossible. The whole procedure could only be done where the citizen had the registered residence. The next amendment is exterritoriality principle when issuing certificates of registration for cars to move abroad. That's a very important service, especially for international carriers. They get those certificates of registration for international traffic, and in that case, the document of the owner for the time of the trip is stored in our service centers. Previously, to get the document back, you should apply to the same service center where you left your service center, and a large number of such certificates was issued in the Ministry of Internal Affairs service centers with limited access at the moment. From now on, the car owner can enter any service center which is open and get the document there. One more thing. We established and law made it possible for driver schools to run theoretical preparations for driver candidates through video conference using well-known Zoom, Skype, and Google Meet applications. Now, those being trained should not necessarily be present in person in the class, and the driver school can train them online. Also, we reduce the amount of topics for the theoretical preparations of drivers by 20% for B1, C1, and C by changing topics like construction and technical maintenance, ethics of vehicle driver, and others. It enables the school to reduce the amount of curriculum, and if previously, for example, to get B category driver license, there were 60 hours, now the driver school can make a decision and bring it down to 50 hours. One more thing, we have expanded opportunities for practical training for driving a car for B, C1, C, and C. Now it's 5 hours a day. Previously, drivers would train 2 hours a day first and then 4 hours a day. Now we made it possible to train such drivers 5 hours a day. So currently, if you calculate the term for the training, we have reduced the total duration from 2 months and a half to a month and a half to 2 months. And now the driver school can make a decision on their own about reducing the curriculum of theoretical preparations and increasing the time for practical training. I'd like to emphasize again that all those 7 amendments will enter into force after they are published, and they will only remain in effect during wartime and 3 months after the wartime the martial law is over. Next changes I'd like to describe are more about the algorithm of training for those candidates, and I'd like to emphasize that they will be available 2 months after they are published, and they will remain in force on a permanent basis. So what has changed there? Training in the driver school will be clearly split into 2 separate stages, the theoretical and the practical one. Previously, you had to finish theory and practice training to pass an exam, and only after that you could approach the Ministry of Internal Affairs Service Center to pass exams and get your driver's license. After those changes come into effect, the training in driver school will be split into a theoretical and practical part. Prospective drivers will pass theoretical training first. Without any exam, they will get a certificate and then apply to the Ministry of Internal Affairs Service Center for theoretical exam. After they pass successfully that exam at the Ministry of Internal Affairs Service Center, that person will be trained by the driver school for practical driving, pass an exam, and get a certificate about completion of practical training. And after that, within 2 months, it will be possible to approach any service center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to pass a practical exam to get a driver license. So actually it becomes a guarantee of security on the roads, because for practical training the person should have already been trained in traffic laws, and practical training they will be able to go to the practical training in any facility, irrespective of where they were trained theoretically. So those candidates would be able to choose a driver school at each of the two stages. For example, you can be trained in theory in city of Kyiv and then get practical training in the city of Lviv. And the last change we have introduced is about being able to get paid number plates for all types of vehicles. Previously, unfortunately, those paid number plates could only be issued for cars, passenger cars, and now you could get your desired combination of symbols for other types of vehicles, for example, for trucks or trailers. And again, I'd like to emphasize that those changes will come into force in 2 months after they are published, and they will remain in force forever. Thank you. Thank you. Could you please tell us how do people get driver licenses for additional categories of vehicles now? Look, it's about retraining, and those retraining programs, curriculum have always been changed. A person approaches a training center and there is a clear scenario the same as the driver is trained. So again, there are 2 stages. Thank you. Could you please tell us what have been procedures of registration of vehicles and removing them from registration? There have been no changes. Everything is in accordance with law. The person comes to a service center, submits their vehicle to be inspected by experts. So there have been no experts. We are working like the way we were working before the war. It works like clock mechanism. But you know, now the need for registration of vehicles has increased approximately 5-fold because there has been zero duty for import. It's very difficult for us, but I know that in place that service centers work at 200% workload. What could you suggest to those Ukrainians who reside in those areas where service centers don't operate yet, where databases are still inaccessible? Look, we are making every effort so that jointly with other armed forces who occupy territories, we would immediately open our service centers and start providing services. I'd not like to jump ahead, but we are planning to open this week almost in the city of Kharkiv itself, a service center almost in Kharkiv. You know that our armed forces are now just getting to the borders of Ukraine, so now we clearly follow them and we enable our citizens living in our territories to get those state services, government services. Dear colleagues, you're welcome with your questions. You're welcome. Thank you. I'm Vitaly Golod from Ukrinform. Please tell us this. Recently there was a regulation about splitting the training into a theoretical and practical part. And as far as I understand, for theoretical training, you get a certificate valid for 1 year. And then for after practical training, there is a certificate for 2 years. So what happens if you haven't passed the practical exam yet and your theoretical certificate has already expired or is expiring? So what to do? Look, it's regulated by the resolution which I mentioned, and in that case you have to pass theoretical training again. But you know, 1 year is sufficient amount of time to come for practical training for any driver school. We thought that 1 year is sufficient amount of time. But you know, 2 years to come to a service center and pass an exam, I think that's enough. One more question is about green number plates for trucks, for vehicles. Are they issued? No problem. There is a sufficient inventory of those. You mean you approach any service center? You mean those electrical vehicles, right? No problem with getting those green ones. We issue them every day. Thank you. Thank you. More questions? Mr. Moiseenko, good afternoon. Andrei Shengret from Apostrophe TV channel. You mentioned the zero import duty for vehicles. No, pity I mentioned it. You said that you have 200% workload at service centers for your employees. Could you please describe it in more detail? How much has the demand for vehicles increased? And maybe you have information how many of them are being registered now. Look, I see the increase in demand and increase in the amount of operations in our service centers, the amount of transactions, approximately twofold. That's why I'm talking about 200% workload compared with what we had at the end of March. I do not mean the total number, but each and every service center being opened. There are service centers where we have even 250% workload increase. I cannot comment, the custom service is not the area where I have all the data, but I have some feeling that now the demand is even 2.5 times higher than what we can now handle all over Ukraine in all our open service centers. So unfortunately, it results to some extent in increased lines and in waiting lines and increased waiting times. But with this peak workload, it's very difficult to us. We cannot immediately increase the number of our service centers by a factor of 2.5. So we do everything we can. We resume the electronic waiting list and all that. Any more questions? Thank you. We had Yevhen Moiseenko with us, head of the main service center of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us.